Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's live writing session where we are going to be having our wonderful Stephanie Golden, who is also an advisor for Strange Inc. And she also partook in the recent LitFest conference 2025, which was an online writing conference. And she said so many insights. And for a while, we have just kind of been thinking about doing a live Q&A. Just out of interest for the questions that our community has and just questions in general. So Stephanie, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, voice has power.
I am a professional writer and editor. I worked for a publishing company for a long time, and then I went freelance editing, and then I started writing, and I've done all kinds of different writing. I've done I've written 2 or 3 books on my own. I've written books for other people, and I've done very intensive editing on many people's books. And I've also written journalism. I've written what they call content for nonprofit organizations, like newsletters and things like that. So I have, and I've written 2 short stories, and one of them was just published last month. So that's a new one for me. And I write essays which have been published in various magazines, online, mostly online magazines. So I have a kind of wide experience of the publishing process because a few of my clients self-publish their books and I help them through that process. So I know all those things. So if you have any questions that cover those particular areas, those are the ones I'm strongest on. But I also have a wide range of colleagues who do other things. So I've heard information from other people. So I can possibly help with that too.
Brilliant. And Stephanie is also going to share some resources soon. Stephanie, I do see something in the chat box which says resources, but I don't see any resources there. I'm not sure if that's intentional.
That's the thing that they're below. You have to scroll.
Oh, okay.
I don't know where I saw resources just before, and I don't know the thing that I published, that I posted. It might be too long for the chat. I don't know if there's a limit in the chat, but anyway, the one that starts www.janefriedman.com is, I think that's one I've seen before. That's the first one. And
okay.
Fortunately, this chat box doesn't formatted it as nicely as I formatted it in my Word doc, but I will email you the Word doc and then you can perhaps distribute it. But these are a variety of resources that you can use to find out about the publishing process, to find out about the publishing industry, to find out a lot of small magazines and small presses that you can investigate if you want to publish, and to find out about scams, because there are many, many scams in the publishing industry, and it's very helpful to know where to go, because if you start putting your name out there, like on a website, you will get lots and lots of friendly emails from people who want to help you. And there's all kinds of these scams that writers get. And so you can, if they smell bad, you can check them in these various sites, which specialize in investigating and reporting on them. So that's what's in the page of resources.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And for those of you, we will be, God willing, sharing those resources after this session. So with no further ado, let us just open it up for questions. Any questions you have. I know that a lot of you did RSVP and you shared your questions in the Google Doc, Google form, and we will be reading those questions as well. So if you have any questions presently, please share, and Stephanie would love to answer them.
I would.
And you can just unmute and then we can hear you. Or if you feel more comfortable, you can also write them in the chat box and I'll read them out for you. if you want, I can begin. I can begin by asking a question. So, this has been something on my mind for a while, Stephanie. And it is the kind of rise of AI, right? And there's so many conversations that are happening about writers and AI and using AI to write. So do you have any kind of like insights about that and guidelines maybe?
I don't have guidelines because everybody has their own approach. And
Mhm.
depending on what kind of writing you do, it can be helpful or not helpful. I feel the more I read about AI, the more uncomfortable I feel because it is very destructive, these data centers that they're building. They're very, very destructive. And there was just an article in the paper yesterday, I believe, about how certain places which don't have strong power grids, people find that they get blackouts because the data centers suck up all the electricity and there isn't enough power in the grid to supply the residential customers and the small businesses as well as these big data centers. So I've started to feel very guilty about using AI. However, before that happened, I was using it's very helpful in some ways when you're doing straight research. Like I could put in a prompt that says, I was trying to help a client publicize his book. And so I put in a query that said, please tell me um, mid-level regional newspapers that have columns that have health columns, because his book was about
Mhm.
anesthesia for consumers. And I wanted to see if I could get one of these columnists to talk about his book in their column. And I knew I wouldn't be able to reach the big papers. So I got regional papers and it spit up like 8 regional papers all over the country. So that's very basic and it's not plagiarizing anybody and it's very helpful. And the other thing I have used it for is to find markets for my essays. If I'm having trouble figuring out where I could try an essay, I could put in a prompt that says, um, online magazines, find me online magazines that have a spiritual interest and are for women who want to, for self-help or understanding themselves. I forget how I worded it. So if you have the Firefox browser, it comes with 4 AIs. So I would try each of them and see, oh, it comes with 3 AIs, and then I have Windows, so that I automatically have Copilot, and which is the Windows AI. And so I would look and see what they came up with. And the last thing that I have used them for most effectively is I hate writing pitches to magazines. I hate it. It's very difficult and I hate it. But I thought, okay, I'm going to see what they say to me and so I would paste in my pitch and I would say, tell me how to improve this pitch or something like that. And so that was a mixed bag. And I could never tell which one was going to be smarter about it. It was
Mhm.
sometimes they would, because these things have been engineered to be very flattering and slavish, to use a more accurate word.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
one of them would say something like, what a fantastic idea for an article. You could try this, you could try that. And
Oh.
sometimes they would say, oh, this is very interesting and you have to develop that. Duh, this is a
Mm,
pitch. I can't develop it in 300
mm.
words. That's for the article, remember? I said that to the AI and it said, oh, sorry, my mistake. Here. And
Yeah, 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 I can definitely see that.
and
Hmm.
sometimes they gave me fairly useful comments, but most of the time they were pretty stupid. And one of them, I put something in, I forget what it was, and it gave me a whole um, it gave me a whole explication about
Mm.
what I should do next, or what, or whatever the article was going to be. And I said I didn't ask for a textual commentary. I only asked you to critique the pitch. Oh, sorry. So you have to be really cautious. And I have not tried to ask it to write anything. It's a little scary. I mean, I have, heard from colleagues who say that they would say, um, write about X in my style of writing. And the thing that it produced was really, really like her style. It was she said it was very disconcerting. And I have also read that the ones that you get free are only good so far. And if you want something much more substantive or deep, you can, you have to pay, like the minimum I think is $20 a month, which is a lot of money for something that you don't know how much you're going to use. So you have to be, try the free ones and see what happens. And very often you can tell that it's AI generated because it's very boring.
Yeah.
So I would never try to use it to write something. I mean, if you're interested in plots, you might say, are there any holes that you put in your short story? Like, oh, there's also a limit to the number of words you can put into, or characters you can put into the free ones. So if you have a short enough story, you could say, where are my plot holes? I don't know if you would get anything useful back, but it doesn't hurt to experiment because it doesn't cost you anything except a certain amount of frustration. So that's what I would suggest. And
Definitely. So
there are people on Substack who write about this. Substack is a very useful source for a lot of information about a lot of different things.
mm, brilliant. So that was very insightful, Stephanie. AI is definitely rising. There's different levels of AI. I can't even remember the names of them, but I do believe that you did share some very important guidelines. I know you said you weren't going to share them, but I do think that these were guidelines. And just one of the main ones is that there's a lot of inconsistency, and just keep rechecking and checking the information because AI is not always correct. So and it's made to flatter us, so we want to keep using it. So with that being said, we do have a sister Saf sharing something inside of the chat. I'll read it out to you. I think Stephanie, you had a quick read. So hi Stephanie, how do I write not for myself but an audience? I would like to write a novel, but every time I begin, I find that I'm unsure of how to portray my ideas that would be interesting to an audience. So how would you answer that, Stephanie?
I think you would start by writing a piece of it, like the first chapter. It depends what the novel's like. And fiction is different from nonfiction. If I am writing for a certain magazine or some other place, I know that I have to write in a certain style. I have to, I once, this was a long time ago, I wrote a long chapter on leukemia for a medical website, and they wanted me to write an 8th grade level. And the way they test the level is the number of syllables, the number of words with more than 3 syllables, and the number and how long the sentences are. And the word leukemia has 4 syllables. And you can't say, and I had to say leukemia all the time because there are 4 types of leukemia, so I had to specify. And I couldn't fit inside those guidelines. So the editor compromised by telling me to put the word leukemia in parentheses. She seemed to think that would make it okay. But in a novel, the novel is basically from your heart and your soul and your ideas. And so you can't make that calibration very easily unless you're deliberately writing a YA novel, in which case you have certain vocabulary constraints and constraints on content because you can't refer to concepts that are too sophisticated for, say, a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old. So that is very clear. But if you're writing a novel for adults, I wouldn't try at all to adapt, because the best kinds of novels come out of your being. And the closer you can get to putting your true beliefs and feelings on the page, that's where you start. And depending on the kind of novel, there's a lot of craft in writing a novel. So you learn from your attempts, and you might write the whole thing and decide that you need to completely rewrite it. I mean, most people rewrite everything. So
Mhm.
that's the basic thing. The other thing to do is read other people's novels, read how their novels are structured. What kind of voice do they use? Do they use the first person? Do they use, like, there's technical terms for the voice, the narrative voice. Is it first person? Is it close? Third person? Sometimes some novels are written in the second person, you. Some are written. I read one novel that was written in the plural first person. It was an office story, and it talked about we. This new manager came and we did this, we did that, and I thought it worked. It wasn't a deeply personal novel, but it was a very good novel. And you have to experiment a lot and see what makes you comfortable, and see when you feel that you're getting your voice out. But you have to have a certain amount of belief in your own ability, in your own message and your own ideas. Because if you say, are people going to hate this? Then you're losing, because all you have when you write a novel is yourself and your resources. You could do research. If it's a historical novel, you could do research about the historical period, so you would have people dress correctly and take the right kind of transportation or whatever they were doing. But if it's really your query has scrolled up, so give me a second to oh, here we go. Not for yourself, but for an audience. You have to understand also that some people will be interested in the kind of novel that you're writing. If you're writing a novel about a woman's experience, then you're not going to get a lot of guys. But from what I read, men don't read as much as women do. So, think about that. But mostly you think about that after you write it, and you think, who's going to read this? Because there's no such thing as everybody will be interested in my book. And if you want to find a publisher, the publisher has to know who to market it to, because that is the business part of getting a book published. Unless you just want to self-publish and do the whole thing yourself, and you don't care if some people will research and do all the marketing themselves, but that's tough. It's tough, and you need skills. So I hope that helps, because, I can't really add anything to that. Just believe in yourself, whatever you're trying to do.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Okay, so the next question is from Sadia. And she said, hi, in fiction writing, I tend to have a lower word count than I intend. I think I have the main scenes that move the story along, but I struggle with adding in the scenes that are more supporting scenes. Do you have any advice for me on what to look out for and how to work on this? Thanks.
As I said, I'm not much of a fiction expert, but I do have one thing that I could say, which is that I have noticed, this is the opposite actually of what you're saying, but I think it's important. People who don't have this craft of writing fiction sometimes think they have to describe everything. And you see, like, if somebody walks into a room, you see they describe everything in the room. I think what's really important in fiction, one thing that's really important in fiction is to understand the function of each scene. Why does this happen? What is its function in driving the narrative? When you say supporting scenes, I'm not too sure what exactly that consists of. I would say that, like, when I wrote this story that I just published, it's a fairly long story by the standards of today. It's now 6,300 words. It was a little longer when I have a friend who writes fiction, and she said that she creates a chart. And the chart and what you do is you write in the chart every scene. You just put them in a list across the page. Say, like, I like to play around with software, so I did it in PowerPoint, but you could just write it on a piece of paper. So this scene happens, this scene happens, this scene happens. And so then you look at them and you think, what exactly is going on in this scene? What's its function? This is where you have to be analytic and not intuitive about your novel. Because writing anything, for me, it's a balance between the sort of inspirational and intuitive and the analytic and craft. So part of the craft is understanding the structure. I've read, memoirs by people who have written things and they put a big chart on the wall. This is for nonfiction as well as fiction. They put a big chart on the wall, which is the progression of the story. And so if you change something, you can move the piece of paper around, or you can move, like, the PowerPoint box around, and see, it's a visual way to play with your structure. So I don't know if you think, I'm not sure why you would intend a certain word count. Does it require that word count, or do you just have an idea in your head that you need a word count of such and such? I would let it be more organic as far as how long it turns out. And there's also a very helpful technique, which is not a technique. It's like, put it away for a week and go back to it, because the unconscious does a lot of work in the background. And so things like, I find that I have always tried not to write right up against my deadlines, because if I have a few days not to look at it and then I look at it, all the problems that might be in it are suddenly more obvious to me and I can fix them. And I like to write things as well as I can so that editors have less opportunity to mess around with it. So that was what I would say.
Brilliant. You got a heart. You got a heart from
Oh,
Sadie.
thank you.
So the next question is Ascarini, and she said, hello, Stephanie. You've mentioned a bit about plot twist. Can you elaborate more on that? How to make an amazing plot twist? Is there any specific techniques we can use as a practice?
Well, I think I just answered that one to the best of my ability, because I really, as I said, I'm not a particular expert on fiction. I did plot out that story, and I wound up cutting 1,000 words from the original version. I saw all the things that weren't necessary, and when I asked myself that question, what is the function of the scene, I could see that I had too many scenes, or I had too many things happen. Every detail in fiction should have a function. That's why I brought up describing the room, because you don't need everything that's in the room. You only need the things that are meaningful, that will reveal the character. You don't need to describe everything that somebody is wearing. You only need to describe the things that will give a sense of their personality.
Love it. Yeah. Yeah. Nihal, you have your hand raised.
Yes. Hi, Stephanie. I'm Nihal. I Predominantly a poet and fiction writer. I've published stories and poetry in journals before. Right now I'm working on finishing my collection of short stories, and I'm thinking about the publishing process and how to query agents and all of that. So I was wondering if you could speak to that. I'm just interested as somebody who is Black, a Muslim woman. I want to find an agent who will advocate for me in my writing. And, I'm thinking of going with like small presses so that they really can help me market my work and care about it as opposed to, going with the big five. Um, and then just another quick question, like how does ghostwriting help you or hold you back when it comes to writing work for yourself and publishing your own work under your own name? Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. So the first thing that you should do is look at that Jane Friedman website, because she has everything on there. If you go to a small press, you don't usually need an agent. One of the, I have a friend who has written a memoir, and if you have an amazing story for your memoir, like you were abused in a very spectacular way when you were a girl, then you can get a contract with a big publisher, because the story itself is flamboyant enough to get an audience, or to make them think it'll get an audience. But her memoir is about her mother, and although it's interesting, it's not extraordinary in terms of what happened to her. She has her insights and so on. But she made a list. She would like to have a big publisher, and I don't think she's going to get it, because she made a list of something like 15 agents. And you have to read their website. I'm sure you know that. You have to read their website. You have to see what they're interested in, and then you have to follow their instructions for what they want to see in every detail. Make it exactly what they say. If you have to reformat the document you send them, do that. And she's been through, she had one agent who said she was really excited, and it turned out this was not a full agent, this was an intern, and she didn't know that at the time. So now the agency seems to be not interested, and she was ghosted for a long time, and now she doesn't know what to do. So she's beginning to think about small presses. So the agent search, what I have done in the past is write a letter to an agent, which is, writing a pitch. It's basically, who am I? Why is this book something you would be interested in? Who do I think is going to be the audience for this book? It's got to put on your marketing hat for this. It's not about art right now. Who would be interested in this, and why where I've been published before in your case, and how much of an audience I had, what were the places you were published in. And you have to make them, and then when you write the proposal, you have to do comparable titles. You have to explain why your stories fit in to these titles, because that proves that there is actually a market out there for stories like yours. And why is yours, or what yours add that's different from theirs. The other thing is to go through the small presses, and there are dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And so if you look at some more of my links in the resources, you can find an enormous number of small presses. And there's something called the CLMP, Coalition of Literary Magazines and Presses, something like that. It's in here. They publish calls for submission every month from small presses. And there's this woman named Erica who has a blog that's in there too. And she also publishes calls for submission from small presses. And it's exhausting, because you have to look at what they do. You might want to read a couple of their books, or at least one of their books, and see if it seems that you are a natural match for them, and then see what they want in the form of a submission. They might just want a pitch letter. They might want a whole proposal. Mostly a proposal is A proposal for a collection of short stories is different from a proposal for nonfiction because they have to see the actual stories, at least one of them, but they'll tell you what they want. And I really can't say, because I've never done that. I sold one short story in my life after, and we had 19 rejections before this person took it. So it's a slog, and writing this thing is wonderful and it's fun and it's deeply involving. And getting it published, as you must know, because you've been published before, is terrible. It's a lot of work, and you have to be tough and get rejected. But it's also true that a lot of these online magazines and small presses are very happy to welcome people of color and all types of diversity. I've seen that because I read these all the time. So I hope that helps. Thank you. I guess it does.
Brilliant. So we had another question here from Saf. She said, that was my next question. Thank you for asking this, Nihal. I was interested in learning how to find an editor or agent and get published.
Well, the question is, what is it that you want to get published?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I don't see. Oh, here it is. It depends what you want to get published. Because I've said a lot about that already, how to adjust if you're writing nonfiction. And it's a lot easier to sell nonfiction because you are filling some kind of need, and you have to say, it's very hard to do this. Believe me. I once read a book called How to Market Your Books. And it was written by a husband and wife team who were book publicists or marketers or something like that. And they said, you would be amazed at how many people don't know what their book is about. But I was not amazed because I had already had that experience. You need an elevator pitch. And you need to be able to boil down what your book is about in, say, one sentence or two short sentences. In the film industry, they call this a log line. And there's a woman who wrote a really, really good little book about how to do that. And she spoke at a conference I was at, and I went to her presentation because there was no other thing on at the time that I was interested in. And I was sort of skeptical because it was a conference of nonfiction writers. But she was terrific. And she talked about how she talked about how to boil down the essence of your book. And then she has this little paperback book you can get on Amazon, How to Write a Log Line. And I can't remember her name offhand, but I'll put it on the resource sheet when I send it to Aisha, and she can send it out to you. It makes you think in a way that you're not used to thinking. And even, I mean, most movies are stories, they're not documentaries. And if you have written a novel, that will also help you pitch your novel. What happens in your novel, or even your memoir?
Mm-hmm. Okay, brilliant. And Saf Saeed, she answered your question, Stephanie. She said, for example, a novel, children's book, and nonfiction. So I think you answered that, right? Or do you want to add more?
I think a child's book is a whole different part of publishing that I'm not that familiar with. I have a friend who wrote, I don't know, when you say child, you mean a young child or say a tween. I have a friend who wrote a YA novel. It's some kind of mystery story. It's not published yet, so I haven't read it. And she found a small publisher, I think in New Jersey, and it took her almost no time. And I was very surprised. So, and I have another friend who writes slightly weird fiction. She has a very interesting imagination. So her last book had ghosts in this California town. And she has a publisher out on the West Coast that publishes her books. And what I've learned is that the small publishers all know their niche. They all know their market much more than the big publishers. So they're very good that nobody's going to pay you a large advance for a novel if you're not famous. But the small publisher will pay you less than anybody else, but they understand how to market or they wouldn't be in business. And my experience with book publishers has been three so far has been universally negative. So I would never naturally recommend that somebody should work with a publicist because I think it's very hard to calculate whether or not you're the right person for this person. And you have to understand, for nonfiction in particular, you have to understand what the market is. I wrote a book with a woman who's a body therapist, and we had an editor who was very young, and she was too young to have various aches and pains in her body. And she had an idea about what the book should be like, which was based on a previous book that she had published that was very successful, which was about Pilates. This is not about Pilates. And she made us take the word pain out of the book. And instead, we had to talk about how this routine was going to give you beautiful ballerina arms, and that routine was going to give you a swan-like neck. And she was very pig-headed and adamant, and we had no choice. So we did it. And the book hasn't done badly, but I wrote another book for another body therapist, which was all about pain. And that book, after more than 10 years, is still going strong. I'm still getting royalties from it, even though I only get 20%. So you can see how the understanding of, and we wrote another book about fixing your feet. And that was published by a small press, and they knew exactly what to do with it. It was picked up by other countries and translated. And it sold a lot of copies. So you can control these things. It's better, marketing. I think marketing is better with these small presses. But on the other hand, the big presses make it look very beautiful, and they have a lot of money behind what they do, which I don't know what they do anymore, because the last book I published with a big press was before the internet had really taken off and there was self-publishing. It was before Amazon and Kindle. So that I was able to republish a book of mine because nobody knew when the book was originally published that there was going to be such a thing as an ebook. So I had the rights.
Nice. And Stephanie, so thank you so much for answering so many of these questions. If anyone has any more, please feel free to share. But there are a couple from those the people who had written the questions before this session. And one of the questions which I think is so important is as writers, we feel sometimes it's a very lonely trade, right? You can feel like there's very little support. So how would you advise someone how to write with little or no support?
I think you can get support. I think you need to find writers groups. This is a writers group. It's available to everybody here. There are Facebook groups of women writers. There are Facebook groups of all kinds of writers. I recently decided to get a paid subscription to a Substack, which is about literary magazines. And I don't know how many of you are interested in literary magazines per se, but I was reading the free version, and I saw that with the free version, I could only read a certain number of the comments. And I have never written for literary magazines before the past year or two, and I didn't know that world. So I found that the comments that people posted, like, for example, how do you deal with submissions? There's a lot of controversy and complications with submissions. And maybe Nihal knows that, but maybe she's been through that. but how many times should you submit? How often should you resubmit to the same place? Should you accept the ones that charge a fee? Should you only, and there's all of these things. And so the comments were so valuable that I subscribed so I could read all the comments. And people have strategies for how to submit. And it was fascinating to me. And then when you are a paid subscriber, you have access to these videos where the woman who runs the magazine interviews people. So there was this woman on there, and she said, submit relentlessly is the way she put it. She said, start with 10, and keep a list. And if somebody rejects you, you fall off the list, keep going. Just submit. It made me feel so much better. And that's a community of sorts. You may not have people that you can meet in person with, but you can have online communities. And the things people said were so helpful in the comments. This is how I organize my submissions. This is how I deal with writers' contests. This is how I make decisions about what places to go to. And don't feel that you have no support, because there is support. Yes, you're right. It's the worst process, but it's rewarding when your work is selected. Absolutely. It's like after 19 rejections, you can imagine how I felt when that guy took it. And he turned out to be a great, great editor. And my definition of a great editor is somebody who knows what to leave alone as well as what to change. So that was a wonderful experience for me, and it was worth waiting all those 19 rejections to get it published in a way that made me so happy.
It's amazing. And Stephanie, this was for your short story, right? The one you sent before.
Yes.
It's an amazing story. So would you feel comfortable in sharing the link to that so people can also read that submission?
Of course, I'd love to share the link. I'm gonna put it on that. I can't do two things at once. So instead of trying to get
I'll
the,
remind you. Yeah.
I'll put it on that sheet that I send you.
Please.
Yes.
Okay, so Nihal, she asked a question. She's asking, can you please share which Substack that literary magazine content was?
It's called Lit Mag. Wait a second. This I can do. I should know it by heart, but I don't. Lit Mag News, LIT, new word, MAG, new word, news. And if you go on Substack and search, you'll find it. Just try reading it for a while, and then you can make a decision whether or not you think it's right for you. But there's lots of them. If you go on, there's a guy who has a Substack called Beyond Craft, and he doesn't talk about writing per se. He talks about the mechanics of publishing, and you might try him because you can read all of it. I haven't paid for a subscription to him, but he used to run a literary magazine. So try it and just browse and put in keywords, because Substack is a great resource now. It used to be blogs, but now it's Substack.
Brilliant. So we do have a couple more questions before we close up, and these are to do with hiring an editor. So you are an editor, Stephanie, an amazing editor, and you know what is a good editor as well. So how would you advise someone on how to hire an editor?
It depends again, like I'm a strong believer in intention. It depends on your intention. I edit nonfiction. I don't have the skills to edit nonfiction. Like when you asked me about a plot twist, I couldn't answer you. I can do, like, I volunteer with a program that for a writing program for girls and young women. And I have occasionally helped them with poetry or short stories, but not at this level. So also, very good editors are expensive. So you have to be willing to spend a fair amount of money to get something. Like what I do if somebody can't afford me is I will do I'll do like consulting. I'll read the manuscript and I'll write notes. And maybe I'll edit a few paragraphs showing different issues that they have in their writing to give them an idea. And that works out pretty well. So you could hire somebody just to do a critique and write you notes. Maybe you could take it from there and fix it yourself. There's different ways to go about it. I'm in a Facebook group with a bunch of editors and ghostwriters who do this kind of work. And they all charge a lot more than me, but I charge like $130 an hour. So some of these people have had bestsellers and I've never had a bestseller because I basically pick people I like, or they have ideas I believe in. So very rarely I've had people that were, that I couldn't get along with, to put, that weren't honest in various ways. So you need to feel compatible with this person. You need to, everybody will do a phone call you tell them what your project is and they will tell you what they think they can do for you and see how you feel. It's a vibe thing and you have to sign a contract. You must always sign a contract because that clarifies for everybody what their role is and what their job is. So when you sign a contract, you build in a clause that says, the first month or two is a trial period, and if we don't get along, then we part ways, and this is how we do it, and I will pay you for however many hours you put in. Some people they look at the whole thing and they charge by the package. What will I do to this whole manuscript? So that's what I would advise. And I'm trying to think of places where you could find ghostwriters. You could just do a Google search, because if somebody's a ghostwriter, they have a website, and the website will say what they will do for you. I mean, if most people are writing memoir or fiction, and memoir and fiction are very similar in that the art of the writing is very important. In nonfiction, the writing has to be clear, it has to be well organized, but it doesn't necessarily have to be literary. But for memoir, it does. And for fiction, of course, it does. So, think about that. And there's a woman who runs an organization for ghostwriters, but she mostly does business ghostwriters. And I don't know if there are people who aren't, but her name is Marcia. I can type her name in the chat. Except the chat is confusing me because I can't find a place to type anything in. So that's another thing I'll put in the because, and then there's my organization. I'm writing down what I'm giving you. What was the last thing I said I would put? The first thing I said I would put on that sheet of on the sheet of resources. The first thing I promised you I'd put on that sheet.
Jan Friedman.
And she's already on there.
Ooh,
So I have my story, and there was one before that was a resource. Does anybody remember it? Put in the chat if you remember it. My story was one of them. But anyway, put it in the chat if you remember it. I belong to an organization of nonfiction writers. I mean, if you're writing a novel, to me, it doesn't pay to have a ghostwriter. But some people do it. I wouldn't do it because it's like giving, if you want to write a thriller and you have an idea for a thriller and somebody else writes it, helps you write it, then it's not literature. But if we're talking really literary, then I don't see it. It's like having AI write your novel. So, so I belong to an organization that has a jobs board where people who are ghostwriters post that they're ghostwriters. So I'll put that in too. But if anybody remembers what was the first thing, I think it was still a resource. Nobody remembers? Sorry. If it comes to me, I'll put it on. But it was only one thing, so I thought I would remember, and now it's 4 things. I lost it. Was there another question?
So I think we can actually wrap up now. You've answered so many of the questions. Ooh, how to write a log line. The log line.
That was it. That was the thing.
Thank you, Sadia.
Okay, I'll put those 4 things in that sheet of resources I sent you, and then you can give them to everybody.
Yes, brilliant. And I will send out an email to all of you, and you'll receive that very soon. And yes, Stephanie, would you like to share any final words with all of us today? Any wisdom, inspiration, anything?
I don't know. I mean, when you put me on the spot like that, I can't think of I really wish the best for all of you. I chose to be a writer and not make a lot of money, and I don't regret it. So if you can make a lot of money and also be a writer, that's even better.
Yes.
I feel that I feel that I chose right for myself. So I hope that your choices all work out as well as mine did.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Writing
And
is more fun than anything else, really.
fun.
I shouldn't say fun, because sometimes it's really hard, but it's gratifying.
Gratifying, beautiful. And what I'm hearing as well is there's so much alignment in what you do and the people you work with and your mission. And I think that's really inspirational. That's so beautiful, and a reminder that you can live a life that is gratifying and still stick to your values, right?
That is the message. It really is. Because the people I know who make a lot of money work for big corporations.
Mm.
I had one experience where I worked for a large bank as a consultant. I wrote a newsletter for them. That was like being an anthropologist and going into an exotic culture and trying to understand it. It was amazing. I'm not sorry I did it, because they paid me more than most people would have paid me, and I learned how to use a computer, which I didn't know at the time. It was the mid-'80s. But
Wow.
it was not a nice place, because the people were okay, but I kept quiet. I had to keep quiet.
Yeah. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's structural, right? It could be very suffocating, the
Well,
ideology.
banks are the most conservative industry, I think. If I was in an advertising agency, it would have been a whole different story.
Mhm.
But like Citibank was taking diversity very seriously, even in the mid-'80s. So there were people from all different backgrounds there, all different backgrounds. And every single one of them wore a suit and a white shirt. Nobody had a colored shirt.
Mhm.
And I realized that the suit, the white shirt in particular, of course, a tie, but the white shirt was the message that they were sending. I may look different from you, and I may have a funny last name, but I'm a team player.
Mhm.
So I was there for a couple of years, 2 days a week. And I learned a lot, and I learned how to use page layout software. And it was a very educational, valuable experience. But I would never go to work for a bank again. I learned it. I don't need to know anymore.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And thank you. You're getting loads of love and lots of thank yous from the sisters.
I think this was a lot of fun for me.